welcome back to KnowYourZero.com. Today we're going to talk about part 2 of the 22-284 Winchester Wildcat front ignition. So by now you've probably watched the first video and you're tuning into this to find out what the results were, what happened, and maybe learn a little something about the whole front ignition theory, and there's a lot of stories going around out there. There is a lot of information out on the web. You're going to have to do some digging and some research and read for yourself, determine if it's something that you want to pursue, you don't want to pursue, if it's a little scary for you. I did quite a bit of in-depth reading before I even burnt the first kernel of powder with front ignition modified cases. For starters, Rocky Gibbs, through Midway USA, they have a CD. I think you can get it off Amazon, Brownells, and some other places. His second chapter is front ignition loading. He goes through in-depth discussion about the tube, case preparation, amount of powder. There's a percentage in there for flash tube length, for case length measurement. I found out that's pretty darn accurate. I did my own conversion for percentage and was very impressed with the flash tube length versus the case you're dealing with to get proper burn, ignition, and gain in velocity, which I did get, which we'll talk about that in a little bit. Another good reference I found, September 1938 American Rifleman. On page 3, this is the original, I'll have a close-up on this later, article from Elmer Keith on duplex loads. That was printed by American Rifleman. This is where the birth of the front flash tube and duplex load misconception all kind of came about. Two different things, duplex load and front ignition. If you have or can pick up a copy of Elmer Keith's Hell I Was There, there is a chapter in there that deals with, prior to this article in American Rifleman, Charles Newton and Elmer Keith brainstormed and came up with the front ignition flash tube. And in that kind of talks about a little of the misconception of why it was labeled duplex loads. Dig into that, read it, it's super interesting, you'll find it pretty good. So in 1938, 5 of July, is Charles Newton's patent on front ignition. The two different styles. There's the thread-in style, which I did, and there's also a flared style. The patent goes in depth on everything, theory, ignition. It's got some good information on that. Elmer Keith also put some gun notes out, and I don't have which one this is, what year it is. 1982, gun notes. And Elmer Keith is talking about African game hunting with front ignition loads. And he also touches on the 50 caliber front ignition loads that had some detonation issues. Read about that. It's a total different story. So if you're a little apprehensive on this whole theory of the detonation, and you get people on forums talking about you're going to blow the case up and shatter your rifle, don't do it. It's a failed concept. There is a naval thesis in 1976. It's online. You can look it up. Pressure testing, chamber pressure testing, velocity testing, burn rates. They didn't blow up any rifles. They had pretty good success with it. They come to the conclusion that I did and a lot of other people did. It's a lot of work. Yes, it is. It's painstaking to take this flash tube right here and thread it. You're going to have to get a die. You're going to get taps. So sourcing these things, I had to go to eBay to get this stuff because it came out of the UK to get 1/840. The reason I stuck with 1/840 was that's what Charles Newton used, and that's what Gibbs used. And it was the one that I could get when I did order my flash tube, and I found it online. Public service announcement, you're going to have to look for your own, because I'm not going to tell you where to get it, because if you want to develop this, you're going to do the research. Just be critical of wall thickness of the tube. When you thread this by hand on the outside to get your 1/8 40, you want enough thickness on that where it's going to not pull a thread off when you put it in there and you thread it, that it will seat good and it's got enough diameter in there to hold a good thread. The inside flash hole diameter, Rocky Gibbs talks about a specific diameter. I'm a little smaller than that. Didn't seem to notice any issue with any primer flame going through there at all. There was a Army Research Laboratory in 2007 that had a write-up on flame spreading process in small caliber guns. That's a good read too. That's online. Do some research, do some Googling, it'll come up. They kind of did the same thing as the Navy one, but not near as in depth as the Navy one. Some good reading, very good information in here. Now on longrangehunter.com, there is a guy that visits that place, Allen Precision Rifles. Kirby Allen is his name. And he came up with a Wildcat, a .224 Allen Magnum. That was a severe overbore Wildcat that he came up with and worked with and tested, but he also tried front ignition on it. This is just all his talkings and ramblings on the case, front ignition, experiments, and it's a really good read. He goes into in depth on the benefits and pros and cons of front ignition, whether you should venture into it or not. This is just some notes that I've taken on the front ignition, where for throat erosion, powder burn rate, and my personal experience on what happened. Another good resource I found on a forum, someone had just a thread post of Cartridges of the World 10th edition. So if you go to page 482, there's an article by Stan Skinner. Front ignition. This guy did his own, modding up his cases, made his own flash tubes. I'll tell you right now, he cheaped out originally on the tubes and bought them at Hobby Lobby or some craft place, and it was a very thin wall. He had the exact problem I warned you about. Too thin of threads will pull the tube right off and won't handle it. And then he did find some thicker walled tube, had really good results with it, and he noticed the same thing I did. His standard deviation was way low. Really, really good numbers there, so that's something to look further into. The dies that I said I got off eBay, I had to get them from 80 Tools online out of the UK. You can use any thread pitch you want. They talk about 1/8 40. I tried some different ones, didn't quite make it, so I stuck with the 1/8 40, had really good success with it. That's the only place I could find that had taps and dies that I needed. Some of the experiences I had with the 22-284 cartridge out on the range, when I had my pet load of 53 grains of H1000, I was averaging about 3,450 feet per second. With front ignition, I experimented with 2 lengths of flash tubes, and I was able to get 3640 for velocity. So I gained 200 feet per second or so. But what I found after doing all this reading and research and digging around, that there is a formula that you can devise that will give you a percentage rate. Base of the case to the shoulder, and then you do a little voodoo magic with math and you can determine a starting flash tube length. And that's what I did, and that's where I came up with 32 millimeters. And that's where I kind of started at, and I lengthened my tube from there. And it was fairly easy to find a flash tube length that was optimum for the case, where I had best velocities, and didn't really notice any overpressure signs. So I had such good success with the 22-284, I did it with the 30-06. Exactly the same thing that Rocky Gibbs did, and even Elmer Keith did some 06 case modifications. Modifying the cases aren't bad at all. I have some pictures in there. Usually I chuck it up on a lathe, get everything centered, and then drill and tap from there. But the tubes themselves, handwork. I mean, I made jigs where I could hold the flash tube and I could hand thread it. And like they talk in there about 2.5 turns with your die, they're pretty darn close to being right there. So that's some finesse. Once you get the hang of it, though, you can start pulling some tubes out of it and get a stat going pretty easy. But the 30-06, like I talked about, I noticed really good results with that too. Didn't have any high pressure signs. The barrels were cooler. I tried running some temperature checks with a heat temperature gun, but by the time I would eject the brass, grab the gun, shoot the case, shoot the chamber, shoot the barrel, seconds were rolling, and my numbers weren't real consistent because the quickness of me grabbing the gun to check all the temps. So what I found in here is really inconclusive, but I'll tell you one thing, grabbing a hold of the barrel on a 30-06 after a 6-round string, bang, 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 it wasn't hot at all. So there's a telltale sign right there. 22-284 the same way. So it's well worth the adventure if you want to dig into it. If you're up to checking it out, doing some reading, invest some time, some resources, and I'm pretty happy with the results on it. And I'll be shooting front ignition loads in my 6mm 284, my 22-284, and my 30-06, and it's a good thing. So it's up to you whether you want to try it or not, but I sure appreciate you tuning in. I'll have something on my website with a write-up on it, and remember to support your Second Amendment, and talk to you later. 100 yards, 22-284 Winchester with front ignition flash tube. These shots were taken after 10 rounds of conventional primed cases, so the barrel was really fouled with copper. This shows you what front ignition will do even with a copper fouled barrel.